Thank you. All right, so I guess we'll just go right ahead and get started. Maybe some people who are, because of the time change, I don't know what's going on in Minnesota.
Well, they would have been here an hour ago.
Oh, okay. So. Are you ready? Taking refuge and generating bodhicitta. Sangye chedang soki chognam la jangchu bardu dagni kyapsu chi daki jinso gipe sonam ki rola penchir sangye druparso sangye chedang soki chognam la Jangju Bardu Dagni Kyatsu Shi Dagi Jinso Gipe Sonam Gi Drola Penchir Sangye Druparso Sangye Chodang Soki Chognam La Jangju Bardu Dagni Kyatsu Chi Daki jinso gipe sonam ki rola penchir sangye drupar. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. And may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And now go to the 7 Lin prayer. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind, and present clouds of every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time and rejoice in the merits of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until samsara ends and turn the wheel of dharma for sentient beings. I dedicate the merit created by myself and others to the great enlightenment. And mandala offering. Zajipaki Jukshim Meto Tramri Rablingshi Nidegen Pagi Sangye Zindu Dropunam da chingla chapasho. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niriyatayam. Now we go to the essence of causation mantra. Om Yedharma Hetu Prabhava. Hetu Tesham Tatagato Yavada. Tesham Cha Yo Niroda. Evam Vahi Mahashramanana. Swoha. And stanza 5 from the 18th chapter of Nagarjuna's Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way. By extinguishing actions and afflictions, there is liberation. Actions and afflictions arise from misconceptions, and misconceptions arise from elaborations. Elaborations will cease through cultivating emptiness. Okay. I think we have a really interesting session today. This is the final session on the selflessness of phenomena. And again, this is one of those chapters that was very, very difficult to comprehend upon first reading, second reading, third reading, finally through viewing all of the commentaries and all of the annotations on the commentaries and a lot of research based on what was in the commentaries, I think we've got something that will be understandable to us. So let's get right to it. Dickie and Ajay are not coming today. They had a grand opening of Ajay's new convenience store and gas station that's on Hildebrand in between Blanco and whatever that is, San Pedro. And so they're really tired, so they're not coming today. So we have a little time if we need to have questions or go a little over time. I think it will work today.
Except we have to be something.
Well, yeah, but not until 2:30. So just as a little review, we began our discussions on selflessness or identitylessness, as His Holiness calls it in his commentary, with the selflessness of persons. Nagarjuna states in his Jewel Garden that there is a person who undeniably exists, who engages in actions, experiences the results, and who is the actor in cyclic existence and in the process of liberation. The self of a person cannot exist apart from the aggregates of consciousness and form that make up our experience. However, not one of those aggregates, or the assembly of all of those aggregates, or the continuum of any one of those aggregates can be said to be the person, can be identified as the person. The self of a person can only exist as a conceptual label and name that is imputed onto the aggregates of form and consciousness. That is what we do. That is how we exist. When our aggregates of form and consciousness, when we're born, our parents or guardians name us, and that name then becomes identified with the person and who we are. But all the way we exist is merely as that label or that name that make up, that identify the form and the consciousness. So then we went into the selflessness of phenomena. We went into the first part of it, which was the selflessness of the body and selflessness of feelings. Shantideva said there are 4 areas of our experience that this selflessness of phenomena applies to, which were body, feelings, and now today it's mind and other phenomena. So in the selflessness of the body, what Shantideva showed was that the body itself, similar to the person, the body itself can't be found among any of its individual parts, like from its limbs, its joints and muscles and so on, all the way down to the subatomic particles that comprise those parts. Neither can the collection of the parts that form the body be the body, because the collection of the parts themselves can't be found in the collection of pieces and segments that form all of those parts. So the conclusion that Shantideva comes to, that we talked about last week, is that the body exists merely as a conceptual label and name that is imputed onto the parts that form what we call the body. And the parts themselves exist as mere conceptual labels imputed onto those segments that form each part, and so on. So it's through a kind of illusion then, with regard to conceptually named parts, that we conceive the notion of body in the same way that in the dimness of twilight, a pile of stones in the shape of a person can be mistaken for an actual person. Feelings as well, such as pleasure, pain, aversion, fear, and depression, don't exist inherently in and of themselves. Depending on the person, like we talked about last week, the same object or experience can act as the condition for both good and bad feelings. We easily can see this from our own experience, such as when we have some food, a particular taste of a particular kind of food that is completely delicious for one person and completely disgusting for another person. Or when we go to the gym and we are exercising because we're trying to build up our strength and our muscle tone, and we'll feel a sense of accomplishment when afterwards, if our muscles and joints kind of ache and are painful, because we'll think that we're doing something that's good for ourselves. So that pain in the muscles and joints we see as a good thing. However, if that same pain in our muscles and joints was inflicted on us by someone else, and we didn't want them to do that, we would have a completely different reaction. We'd be very angry and upset by that pain. So you can see that the pain itself does not inherently exist as a distinct experience that is experienced in the same way by everyone. It can be experienced in different ways by different people, depending on the conditions and their point of view. So we cling to our feelings, we consider them like inherently existing things. We concretize them. So we concretize things like joy and pleasure and anger and aversion and depression and so on, as if they existed as these inherent things in their own little boxes. And we can become depressed, or we can become happy, or we can become angry, when in fact none of those things exist that way. They are all malleable depending on the particular person's point of view and the particular conditions. So that summarizes what we covered in the last two sessions. So now we're going into the mind. And what is meant by the mind in Buddhism. In the Western world here, many of us tend to equate the mind with the brain, which is the main organ of our nervous system. This view leads one to think of the mind as if it arose out of matter. And in many ways, this has been the scientific hypothesis in the West. Science still has not yet come to a conclusion about what consciousness is and where it comes from. But in the past, science has assumed that it somehow arises in the brain. According to Buddhism, mind is equated with consciousness or awareness rather than matter. And this conscious awareness is by its nature subjective. Its function is to be aware or cognizant of some object. So there's a subject, which is the consciousness, that is aware of some object, whether it be sight or sound, smell, taste, touch, so on. In addition to being aware, the mind is also what they call in Buddhism clear and luminous. The mind is luminous in the sense that it illuminates by presenting contents to our awareness. But the mind doesn't depend on physical proximity of that content. For example, a concept of the moon can illuminate our mind without our consciousness having any need to be on the moon. So you understand what they're saying by illuminate. So just think of the moon. It's as if your consciousness has become illuminated by the concept of the moon. But we don't need to be near the moon to do that. So that's what they're talking about by luminous or illuminating. The mind is also clear in that it is transparent. The term clear points to a fundamental property of the mind. Water, for example, is by nature clear, so that even when it's clouded and dirty, those impurities can be removed, and the water's natural clarity or transparency will return. In that same way, the mind is clear in that no particular object, such as the moon, or an emotional state, such as anger, is essential to a moment of consciousness. Like the elements, the cloudy water, they're not essential to the nature of water. And these emotions or objects are not essential to the nature of the mind. This is a crucial point in Buddhism about personal transformation and behavioral change.
Is conceptuality?
Yeah, conceptuality is a mental consciousness.
It just comes and goes as well. Thank you.
Yeah. The mind by nature is just clear and illuminating. So this is crucial for our personal transformation and our ability to change our behavior, since it means that the dysfunctional habits that we have that produce our suffering and dissatisfaction can be transformed precisely because they're not essential to the conscious mind itself. I actually prefer it up. I mean, I liked it up.
I know, but then they are on the same level as you. I'm looking at the experience of the viewers.
Okay.
Rather than looking down at me, they're looking straight at you.
Okay. So you got that. This is really important for anybody who's, trying to diet or change some habit. This is an extremely important point, because the mind is clear and transparent. That is its nature. All of our dysfunctional habits that cause all of the problems that we have are not in the nature of the mind, and because of that, they can be transformed because they're not essential to the conscious mind itself. In particular, this means that our ego self-grasping and ignorance that is at the root of our suffering is not an essential property of the mind. Therefore, it's possible to remove that ignorance and ego self-grasping without putting an end to consciousness itself. So in case anybody was worried that if we removed all of our ego self-grasping and all of our afflictive emotions and all of our ignorance, then there'd be nothing left. Buddhism is saying that's not true. There still will be consciousness. There still is existence. We simply are removing, what do they call it? Adventitious properties that don't have anything to do with the nature of the mind itself. So now, Shantideva, we're going into sense consciousness versus mental consciousness. In Buddhism, a distinction is made in the mind between the categories of sense consciousness and mental consciousness. There are 6 categories of consciousness: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mental sense consciousness. The first 5 are the sense consciousnesses, the physical sense consciousnesses, you could say, each arising in dependence on a physical sense faculty or power that has its own unique mode of being. The last is the mental consciousness, which arises in dependence upon the mental sense faculty or power, which has its own unique mode of being. Form is perceived by the eye consciousness, sound by the ear consciousness, smell by the nose consciousness, taste by the tongue consciousness, and touch by the body consciousness. The 5 sense consciousnesses arise through the functioning of their respective sense faculties or sense powers and their respective objects of the senses, such as form, sound, and so on. The mental consciousness arises in dependence on the mental sense faculty or power, but it is not a physical sense faculty. Therefore, a distinction is made between the sense consciousnesses and the mental consciousness from the point of view of their physical or non-physical sense faculties or sense powers. The sense consciousnesses totally depend on an external object for their focus, and they can arise only through the observation of that external object. So although, but the mental consciousness doesn't need to depend on the presence of any external, the observed object. An ear consciousness hearing music will not arise if there is no externally audible music as its observed object, as the object that it would be hearing. But a mental consciousness that's perceiving the sound of music can still arise through remembering or conceiving it, even when no music can be heard externally. Our own experience verifies this. We can think of a song in our head. We can think of I can think of complete orchestral arrangements going on in my head, and then nothing is actually happening externally. So our mental consciousness is capable of doing that, where our sense consciousnesses have to have an external object as from which they will arise. Now we go into something interesting here, because some non-Buddhists believe that awareness exists somewhere in the interior of a person, while others think that it may exist in the extremities of the body, such as the head or the hands. There's a common belief in the West that visual perceptions, thoughts, and mental images are located in the brain. Although it's undeniable that the brain is involved in the arising of these cognitive events, where is the evidence that these subjectively experienced events occur in the head or anywhere else in physical space? A 20th century American philosopher named Edwin Arthur Burt wrote a critique of the Western assumption that the mind is located in the brain in his work entitled The Metaphysical Foundations of Modern Physical Science. I think he was from Yale, and it was published sometime in the 1920s. In chapter 8, part B of chapter 8, it's entitled Examination of the Doctrine that Mind is Located in the Brain. And he argues with those who presume that the awareness or consciousness of sensation is located in the brain. He says, if we adopt the premise that our sensations are all located where the nerve fibers leading from the various parts of the body terminate in the brain, then physical sensations must be felt in the brain. Sounds must be heard in the brain. Taste, smells, likewise, they all must be experienced in the brain. The objects and contents of the senses would all be concentrated at their proper nerve endings somewhere in the brain. But given this, Edwin Burt then postulates what then would become of the universe that we know and live in. It would all come down to a series of minute mathematical points in the brain. Even more than that, what in the world can we mean when we use the term brain or talk about the nerve fibers that supposedly lead into the brain? They are also only known to us by our various senses, and so they too must be nothing but minute points, not in the brain now, for that would be unintelligible nonsense, but not anywhere. The whole universe, including the body itself, would disappear from space. And this was a Western philosopher coming up with this in the early part of the 20th century. So now we go to the first stanza . No, the second stanza. Yeah, stanza 103. And we're talking about where is the mind? Stanza 103, Shantideva says, it is not in the body, yet is nowhere else. It does not merge with it, nor stand apart. Something such as this does not exist, not even slightly. Beings by their nature are beyond the reach of suffering. So a true, independently existing consciousness can't be located somewhere inside the torso or within the body's outer limbs, and it can't be found anywhere else. The mind does not intrinsically exist in the nature of the body, neither does it exist independently apart from the body. If the mind is sought, one discovers that it doesn't exist independently. But since it can have no independent existence, not even slightly apart from the body, the root verse says, beings by their nature are beyond the reach of suffering. In other words, conscious beings, sentient beings, are by the nature of their consciousness liberated from suffering. Again, remember that the nature of consciousness is that it is aware, transparent, and illuminating. Anything else is adventitious to that. So in our nature, because of the kinds of consciousness we have, if we could free ourselves from all these adventitious habits, destructive habits, afflictive emotions, ignorance, got rid of it all, cleaned it up, we're already by nature liberated from suffering. There is no suffering there in the consciousness. As it is said in an ancient collection of Mahayana Buddhist sutras known as the Ratnakuta Sutra, which literally means the Sutra of the Heap of Jewels, it says, the mind is not within, the mind is not without. Neither is it both. You cannot point to it. And later in that same sutra, it says, the mind, O Kashyapa, even all the Buddhas have never seen it. They do not see it, and they never shall. In the Prajnaparamita Sutra in 8,000 verses, which is one of the oldest of the Mahayana sutras, and it's one of the foundations of the Mahayana Buddhist philosophy, that sutra says, the mind indeed is not a, quote, mind. The nature of the mind is lucent clarity, clear and luminous, illuminating. So now we are talking about how awareness or consciousness is unborn. And this is stanza 104. If consciousness precedes the cognized object, with regard to what does it arise? If consciousness arises at the same time as its object, again, regarding what does it arise? From what does it arise? So the five sense consciousnesses, the ear, eye, nose, tongue, and body consciousness, they're found to have no true existence, no independent existence. If sense consciousnesses had truly inherent independent existence, they would have to exist independently before, during, and after any object that appears to it. If an object, if an independently existing sensory perception existed before the appearance of its respective object, then what object would it be conscious of? For example, visual awareness has to arise in dependence upon the shape, structure, and color of an object in order for visual consciousness to occur. So if an independently existing visual awareness exists prior to that object occurring, in dependence on what does it occur is what they're saying here. So this verse, this is in Alan Wallace's annotation on this commentary. He says this verse is making it quite clear that the Prasangika Madhyamika view avoids not only the extreme of materialism, set forth by the Vaibhashika and Sautrantika schools of Buddhist philosophy, but also the view that asserts reality is entirely a mental construct, as set forth by the Chittamatra mind-only school. So Prasangikas say material phenomena do indeed depend for their existence upon mental labeling and naming. But perceptions of the physical world of matter, such as the visual cognition of shape, structure, and color, require for their production objects that can be cognized, objects that can be known, that one can be aware of. The Prasangika view does acknowledge a dualism between matter and mind, but the two are seen as mutually interdependent, and moreover, the dualism itself has a purely relative conventional status. It also exists in dependence upon conceptual labeling and imputation, the idea of the dualism between mind and matter. That is a conceptual label that we're imputing onto mind and matter. If an independently existing sense consciousness and its object arise at the same time, the same problem will occur. An object that serves as the cause for the production of a sense consciousness must precede that cognition. A causal relationship is necessarily a sequential relationship, cause, effect, cause, effect. However, cause and effect are not separated by absolute objective time. According to the Prasangika view, not only are effects dependent upon their causes, but causes are dependent upon their effects. For example, not only is the existence of a child dependent upon its mother, but being a mother is dependent upon having a child. The two are mutually dependent, cause and effect. So prior to the arising of any sense consciousness, the object that consciousness is aware of must first be established. Otherwise, no causal relationship would be able to exist between an object and the mind. But if the mind, the conscious awareness, is truly and independently existent, how could it possibly arise subsequently in dependence upon an object or anything else? So stanza 105 again says, if consciousness comes later than its object, once again, from what does it arise? So if an awareness arises after the object has ceased, after the object is no longer there to be aware of, in dependence upon what would that awareness occur? For example, if an ear consciousness hears a sound after that sound has completely ceased, in dependence on what does the ear consciousness hearing that sound arise? It's impossible. It doesn't make sense. So now we go into a section where he's talking about that phenomena themselves are without origin. So this stanza, the second half of stanza 105 says, thus the origin of all phenomena exceeds the reach of understanding. In other words, we can't comprehend the origin of all phenomena. When we seek the inherently existing entity that is imputed onto anything, we'll discover that all phenomena lack independent self-existence. Everything exists in a relational way, purely by the power of conventional or relative agreement. The way in which phenomena arise is beyond our conceptual grasp. Phenomena don't come into being before, after, or simultaneously with their cause. They don't arise from themselves, nor from something else, nor from both, nor from neither of. They are without origin. They neither last nor cease. As it has been said, quote, they do not cease to be and do not come to be. They have no ending and they are not permanent. They do not come, they do not go. They are not different. They are not the same. So a bunch of questions and objections arise concerning this last point, that phenomena have no origin whatsoever. So now Shantideva goes into all of these objections that are raised by the other schools, and really they are the objections that all of us would have. So any comments so far on, yeah.
Yeah. When I've had it happen a few times, and I think maybe others have as well. Like, say I was in a calm state of mind and I would hear a voice say Kovida. So my ear consciousness is picking up in my head.
Oh, in your head. Well, that's your mental consciousness.
All right, so that's just my mental consciousness.
Right.
Even though it arises seeming like I'm hearing something. Okay.
I mean, that would be, I mean, that's what I surmise, because I've also had the same experience where I hear somebody talking. Sounds like they're talking right inside my ear. There's nothing, there's nobody out there. You know, this happened when, this has happened a couple of times. One morning I woke up, this was when Geshe Drakpa was visiting us, and it was his birthday. And his name before he became Geshe, before he became Geshe Drakpa, his name was
Lakpat Seri.
Lakpat Seri. So I woke up that morning, and in my left ear I was hearing Lakpa, and in my right ear Seri, and then Lakpa Seri, Lakpa Seri, 3 times. I have no idea what that was about, but it wasn't as if there was a sound outside of myself saying those words to me. I also had that experience when Kavita's brother Bud passed
But
away.
you know, I mean, I think others have, but you know,
Yeah.
I mean,
And he spoke to me in my ear, but it wasn't like there was a sound outside in the room. So I would guess that would be some kind of mental consciousness.
okay.
You know, perhaps a mental consciousness that is close to the ear sense power or something like that. I don't know, connected somehow. Yeah.
Talking of Geshe,
Yeah.
when he was showing us here's the glasses, and then he put them behind his back.
Yes.
Is that kind of what you're talking about too? Like it's directly your conscious eye consciousness is seeing that, and then when it's not there, it's not there. Whether you think it's behind his back or not, the consciousness and the eyes are going, it's not that.
That's apparently apparently that's what Geshe Drakpa was saying, because I also remember, I don't know if you remember this too, he would say, you know, when we were in our living room at our house, he would say, you all think, you know, you're here in this room, in this house, and that the house that you came from is still there. He said, but actually it's not. It only arises when our consciousness is there for it to arise, for the consciousness. It's similar to what when we were talking about when neurophysicists talk about how everything appears to our senses as if it's really out there, when actually the appearance is all occurring within the mind itself. This is, you know, neuroscience is talking about this, similar to that guy Bert from Yale, who was talking about, you know, how they're saying everything is existing inside the brain. I don't know the answer to that, but Susie, you're right. When Geshe Drakpa said, you know, he put his glasses behind his back, and you said, you think my glasses are still there, that you just can't see them. He was saying they're not actually arising for our consciousness. They're not there for our consciousness. So I think we have a ways to go before we actually realize that one. So here are the objections that people are raising. The objection here is that the Prasangikas are seemingly claiming that no existing entity is found under analysis, that emptiness itself does not exist. When looking for an existing entity, they conclude that there is no form, sound, smell, taste, tactile objects, or mental awareness, that there's no truth of suffering, no truth of the cause of suffering, no truth of the origin of suffering, or the truth of the path to the cessation of suffering. This is all in the Heart Sutra. This is all what Prasangikas are saying in the Heart Sutra. And it sounds as if they're saying that everything does not exist. Like the Prasangikas are saying that all relative or conventional truths are mere illusions appearing to deluded minds, since those minds have no intrinsic existence. But if they're not intrinsically existent, they don't exist at all. And in that case, how can there be true truths? How can there be conventional truth and ultimate truth? If relative truths don't exist, then ultimate truths can't be established either. They also say that apparently the Prasangikas are concluding that everything is positive, that is posited, consists purely of imagined appearances to deluded minds. If something exists simply because it seems to be real to a deluded mind, then nothing could be denied existence. In that case, true and untrue, good and evil, relative truth and ultimate truth all lose their meaning. By eroding the distinction between good and evil, there can be no liberation from suffering by means of correctly avoiding evil and adopting virtuous good things. Liberation from suffering itself would be nothing more than the illusion of a deluded mind. And I think, sometimes in our lower moments, we may think that. We may think, is this really true? Maybe this is just all a delusion, maybe it's just, this is it. We die, it's lights out like that, So in stanza 107, Shantideva says, but that is just the thought of others. It's not what I mean by the relative truth. If subsequently there are thoughts, the relative truth is still there. If not, the relative truth has ceased indeed. So here's what His Holiness is saying that means. The objection by the other schools is that if something is said to exist merely because a deluded mind grasping onto true existence believes it exists, it would simply be an illusion. It would neither be able to render help nor inflict any harm. But one cannot claim that something exists simply because a deluded mind thinks it does. Although entities exist in dependence upon conceptual labeling and naming, it's not true that one person's concepts are necessarily as valid as another's. Nor is it true that each person lives in his or her own reality determined solely by their beliefs. We might deny things that actually do exist. We might deny that things that actually do exist don't exist. So although we're influenced by our false beliefs, we can't escape being influenced by the existing things that we're denying. Like you could deny that, a chain smoker could deny that smoking, would cause lung cancer, that they'll never get lung cancer. I'm immune from that. And they may, believe that, but it doesn't mean that they won't be affected by the smoke and by smoking, and that they may not indeed get lung cancer. Simply denying something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
Don't look up.
Yeah, and I think we probably have a lot of that going on in our society right now, because we're basing what we believe on a lot of things that actually haven't been verified. The things that it's like hearsay or headlines or things like that. And we're not the ones actually on the ground, actually verifying, actually seeing what's going on. So we're just relying on what we're being told. And so there's probably a lot of, I guess, disinformation or misinformation, or partially true and partially false. So it's very difficult for us to figure out what exactly is going on. And this is kind of what they're talking about here. The main purpose. Okay, there's another way. Similarly, we can believe in things that do not exist. Then we're influenced by those false beliefs, but we can't be influenced by the non-existent entities that we think are real. We will be influenced by believing that they're real, but there is no real entity that can influence us. I don't know. Can you think of an example that's like that?
No.
Yeah. Something that we couldn't actually verify, but we say we believe it because we've been told that it's so.
We have so many,
Yeah.
so many quote givens
Yeah.
that are like that. And depending on your religious tradition.
Yeah, I mean,
there's some major duty ones.
right. There's some big ones. I mean, if you're just told Allah is so, or God is so, or I don't know, what are the other things, or even the Buddha, if you can't verify that.
I mean, this is part of the same phenomenon. We've talked about this a lot of times, but in the case you just cited, human beings seem to be social animals wired to accept authority figures. So, and it could be that maybe we're not wired, but just
We're trained.
over millennia, we've had so much experience with people that have bigger guns and bigger weapons and,
Bigger, our parents.
so, anyway, the reason I say that is because we have tons and tons of examples in our everyday life where, say for example, there's so many examples in the medical field of things that used to be good for you that were eventually proven bad for you and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, during the time when one belief or the other is held, the general consensus is, oh yeah, that's good for you, or oh yeah, that's bad for you.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, gosh, I think we're very fickle too, because we want to accept. One of the things that I think influences. I read this recently. A sociologist was talking, and I can't cite who they were, and I can only remember the gist was what they were basically saying, that human beings have such a strong need to normalize their beliefs and behaviors so that they fit into their their tribe, if you will.
Mm.
Probably it's a survival thing.
Sure.
So, in general, people will be influenced and then, absorb the beliefs and norms of whoever they're hanging out with the most.
Yeah.
Which kind of plays into this whole phenomenon.
This is probably why in this Buddhist tradition they talk about the need to somehow remove yourself from that, so that you can spend some meditation time, actually analyzing your own mind, analyzing your own beliefs, analyzing the nature of reality. Because if we're in the fray of job, business, society, coming and going, totally involved, it's difficult for us if we cannot carve out some time for ourselves to really pull within and look at our minds. It's very difficult.
When you're in a work setting or an academic setting, any setting that you're in day after day after day with, a relatively fixed group of people, so it's a community of sorts. Yeah, people come and go, but in general, I know for sure I've experienced this in every work situation. You can feel yourself absorbing the norms of that workplace.
Yeah.
I mean, and in some cases, I remember when I worked at the San Antonio Symphony, there were some extremely bright people and everybody was very witty, and it was sort of like watching a Friends episode. Everything everybody said was a quip or a pun or a whatever. And so, just the whole atmosphere, and I took that on and, started behaving similarly. That was kind of, benign.
Yeah.
But anyways, we all have examples like
Yeah, I think you're right. I think what it is, we want to get along. And so when we get into a situation with the group, I mean, if it's if you're on a team of some kind, you want to work with the team.
Related to this, just very core to what are we really saying when we take refuge?
Yeah.
We're really saying, I'm choosing this lineage, this, the Sangha, if you will. This
That's
is
a
who
good
I'm
point.
choosing. I want to absorb the qualities, and I want to normalize my norms, want to in alignment with this.
I want to be part of this team,
Yeah.
right?
This is what I
Yeah.
want to be like.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
that's all I was going to add.
Well,
It's very core to being a Buddhist.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and I think in order to do that, there is a certain way in which you have to. I don't mean pull away from worldly things, but you have to be able to maintain this connection with the lineage and make that the thing. That's the thing that's most important to you. That's the thing, because otherwise the knowledge and the realizations and the growth and transformation that will come by focusing on that lineage won't happen if our focus is diffused in all different directions. It will just be, oh, Buddhism is a little part of my life here, rather than, whoa, this is the main thing that I'm working on. This really matters, to me. It matters to my happiness, and it matters ultimately to the happiness of everyone that I come in contact with. The entire existence of all interdependent beings is what it's talking about ultimately. So it's a huge thing. It's a view that's quite different from other philosophical or spiritual views that I've been associated with in this lifetime, and I find it, so far I do not find any flaw or fault with this view. It may be difficult to realize, but it doesn't mean that it's flawed in some way. It basically, the difficulty of realizing it comes down to me, my own obscurations, So the main purpose of Buddhist mind training is to recognize and reject these two types of false views: denying things that do exist and believing in things that don't exist. This is done by means of cultivating accurate, perceptual, and inferential awareness, reasoning, and judgment. This is called verifying cognition. They use this term, verifying cognition. Verifying cognition is when you cultivate accurate, perceptual, and inferential awareness, reasoning, and judgment. When the Prasangikas speak of relative or conventional truth, its truth is not determined by objective reality, but by the mind. Objective reality cannot be the criterion for truth, because truth is of the mind. According to the Prasankika view, truth cannot be determined on the basis of some reality existing independently of the mind, because such a reality doesn't exist. That's quite a statement. However, this is not to say there is no reality existing independently of the human mind. The human mind can neither perceive nor conceive of reality independent of itself. Truth is determined on the basis of its being known by a verifying cognition that is non-deceptive and accurate in its perceptual and inferential awareness, reasoning, and judgment. A truth may not be known by a given individual or society, but this does not mean it doesn't exist. If something is apprehended by any verifying cognition, it exists. When we talk of conventional or relative truth, we're referring to something that is true for a mind that grasps onto the inherent existence of things. That's what conventional truth is. For a mind that is grasping onto the inherent existence of things, we're talking about conventional truth. However, the mind that establishes conventional relative reality must not be deluded in terms of mistakenly apprehending what is called its chief object. Here's another term, the chief object of our awareness. And here's an example. A mind that believes in rabbit's horns is deluded with respect to its chief object, namely rabbit's horns, because rabbit's horns don't exist. But a mind that establishes conventional reality is said to be confused only because it grasps onto true existence of something. It correctly identifies its chief object, but it mistakenly regards that object as being truly existence. So that's the difference. When we're talking about conventional reality, we're correctly identifying, the chief object. For instance, a conventionally existing entity, such as a rabbit, and a non-existing entity, such as rabbit horns, both are merely conceptual labels, and neither of those things exist independently in and of itself. In that sense, the rabbit and rabbit horns are both alike, but there is a distinction as to whether they are conventionally or relatively able to render help or inflict harm, and whether or not they are established by a verifying cognition. The cognition of a rabbit is not mistaken with respect to its chief object, namely the rabbit, but the cognition of rabbit horns is mistaken. So there's a distinction between a cognition being mistaken with respect to its chief object, and that mistaken or unmistaken in relation to its chief object. And that is what determines whether it is a verifying cognition or a delusion. Did y'all get that? Okay.
I mean, I heard the words.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I heard the words too. This will be available for download, so you can read over again. It took a long time actually to wade through this and to understand what they were talking about. So I wouldn't be surprised if this sounds confusing. I got it to a point where I felt like I could understand it. Okay. The criterion for conventional or relative existence is the presence of a mind that is unmistaken with respect to its chief object. In other words,
the chief object is. Say those two again. Chief object, and what was the other one called?
a deluded?
Relative
No.
object?
The criteria, I'll just read that sentence again.
Okay.
The criterion for conventional or relative existence.
No, I was looking for the definition of chief object.
Oh, the chief object.
I need.
Okay,
You just said it a couple minutes ago.
I know. When we talk,
It's vital if you're.
the chief object is the thing that you are saying exists. So if you're saying rabbit horns exist, that's your chief object. If you're saying the rabbit exists, that's your chief object. If you're saying this iPhone exists,
Okay.
that's the chief object,
Okay.
what you're talking about. Now, with the chief object, we can be deluded in terms of how we think it exists, or we can be correct in how it's and correct in what it
This is on a conventional level.
that it conventionally exists, but we can also then think that this truly independently exists because I can tell it does. I can feel it. It's separate, you know.
All right.
That's
so
mistaken.
So if the chief object can be seen conventionally correctly.
Right. This
or
is
according to convention,
Right.
delusionally.
right. If I saw this as this is a credit card, I would be deluded about the chief object. I may believe it's a credit card, but it won't function as one, and nobody else will say it will function as one. You know.
Well, bad choice, because nowadays phones function as credit cards.
All right. If I, what do I say?
But it doesn't. I mean,
Yeah, you know what I'm saying. You know, if this was it's a spoon. You know, I'd be deluded about what it was. You know.
Thanks.
so,
Okay, so
okay.
back to your.
Yeah. All right. So there is a distinction between a cognition being mistaken or unmistaken with respect to its chief object, and that is what determines whether it is a verifying cognition or a delusion. A conventionally existing thing, no one is mistaken about what this is. It's a phone, it's an iPhone. These are pieces of paper with print on them. If a deluded view, a deluded view would be saying something that this is a, you know, doorstop. You know, this paper, this is a doorstop, and nobody would agree with that. And they would say you're deluded. And you know, that exists out there. There are those of us who think that something exists when it actually doesn't, and nobody else will say that it does either. It's not a verified cognition. You know, when you see somebody in a tree that doesn't exist there, and nobody else says it exists, then you can't say that that person seeing the person in the tree having a verifying cognition. They're not. They're deluded about what is there, conventionally speaking. So the criterion for conventional or relative existence is the presence of a mind that is unmistaken with respect to its chief object. That's what will make it a conventional truth. You know, all of us will say, you know, this is a cup of some kind. We'll all agree on that. So we're unmistaken in regard to what this is. Makes it a conventional truth. You know, if I said this is a dragon, and I really believed it was a dragon, people would say, you know, you better go see somebody about that. If the validity of its conventional existence is not rejected by any other conventional knowledge, like I said, anybody else, if it is able to yield benefit or harm, if it's actually able to function in a beneficial way or a harmful way, and if it is established by verifying cognition, then it exists conventionally. If not, it does not exist even conventionally. So now we get into the verifying cognition, and there are two types of verifying cognition. Generally, they say two types: perceptual and inferential. Perceptual verifying cognition and inferential verifying cognition. Perceptual verifying cognition includes sensory cognitions as well as certain kinds of mental awarenesses in which objects are ascertained directly without the appearance of the ideas of the object occurring in the mind. And I'll explain that. Inferential verifying cognition apprehends its object in dependence upon conclusive reasoning. And that kind of cognition, inferential cognition, is always mixed with the appearance of the idea of its object. For instance, if one observed smoke coming from a hill in the distance, one could reasonably deduce that there is a fire on that hill. So even though the fire is not seen by the eyes, directly by the eyes, the idea of the fire appears in the mind. You know, you see the smoke on the hill in the distance, and the idea, you cannot almost imagine, oh, there's fire. There must be fire somewhere on that hill. That is an inferential cognition where the idea of the object is appearing in your mind. Because of these two kinds of verifying cognitions, perceptual and inferential, Tibetan Buddhist mental discipline involves training in both meditation and logic. So meditation for the perceptual cognition and logic for the inferential. So meditation is aimed at cultivating subtle forms of perceptual, mental, verifying cognitions. And logic is aimed at cultivating inferential, verifying cognition. The emphasis of this discipline is to learn to distinguish between verifying cognition and the fantasizing mind that conjures up all sorts of fictitious imaginings. And like I said before, I think we've got a lot of that going on. And it's very wise of us to train in these two disciplines, the meditation and the logical reasoning, and then the meditation, which deals with the perception. So it's very beneficial for us, especially living in these times where we're bombarded with daily, minute by minute, with all kinds of information that we can't actually know. Is this true or is this isn't true? So we have to learn. We have to be very skilled.
This is an old example. This again is something that Geshe Drakpa said one time, and it was when the U.S. media or the worldwide media came out and said that Osama bin Laden had been
Killed in Pakistan.
you know, that special forces went in and found him and killed him. And they were so worried about the repercussions that they buried him at sea. And Geshe Drakpa pointed out that without seeing, the way he said it was, no dead Osama, Osama no dead. He was trying to explain to us that until you see a dead Osama bin Laden, you can't object, you can't claim. This was one way it was in the context of trying to explain how their form of logic works. So you just have a provisional, they're claiming this, but I'm not going to take it on board.
Yeah, actually, I mean, his point was there was actually no way to verify that event, to verify the trueness of that event, because we were only taking it upon hearsay, the word of those who said that it happened. And that whole situation was like that. And then later it came out from multiple sources that Osama bin Laden had already died of kidney failure long before that. So this is what I'm saying. we have to use our logic. We have to be very skillful in that as we try and wade through this world that we're in, you know, and make some sense of it. Okay, going on. Hey, we're almost there. We're done.
Everyone's very quiet
Yeah.
today.
Well, it's kind of dense information too. And I've got to read it because I just do not have this at my fingertips here. Stanza 108. The analyzing mind and what is analyzed are linked together, mutually dependent. It is on the basis of conventional consensus that all investigation is expressed. So according to the Prasangikas, subjective conceptual cognition and conceived objects are mutually interdependent. Action depends on an agent of action, and the agent depends on the action. For instance, for example, a sculptor is identified on the basis of his or her activity of making sculptures. And since there are sculptors, the activity of sculpting occurs. But neither the sculptor nor the sculpture has any true, independent, inherent existence. They are established conventionally in mutual dependence on one another. In terms of an analyzing mind and the thing that's being analyzed, one first has to determine that the entity in question that's being analyzed exists conventionally. You know, we have to apply a valid cognition to that to see if it exists conventionally. And then on that basis, we can then establish the ultimate mode of the existence of that thing. So for instance, if I said, this is a dragon, well, we would all go, you know, you're deluded. This is not even convention, that doesn't exist conventionally. We do not say this is a dragon. So if this isn't even a dragon conventionally, there's no way I'm going to find the ultimate nature of what this dragon is. The only way to find the ultimate nature when we analyze this is we have to say, this is a cup, you know, and then you can analyze this cup to find its ultimate nature. But if you're deluded about what the thing is, then you'll never get to the actual nature of that thing because you will be analyzing it incorrectly. I believe that's what that's saying. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, here we are on the last stanza of this section. Stanza 110. Shantideva says, if phenomena are truly analyzed, no basis for analysis remains. And when the object is removed, no, I got to go back one. The second to last stanza, okay, stanza 109. There's an objection that comes up from the other schools. And what they say is, but when the process of analysis is made, in turn, the object of our scrutiny, this investigation likewise may be analyzed, and thus we find infinite regress. So, you know, what again is that saying? They're saying, in order to understand that all phenomena are without true existence, the process of analysis that is used to show that all phenomena are without true existence has to be itself investigated. So if we're investigating this cup and we go through a process that determines that this cup does not exist inherently, it has no self independent existence, and the ultimate nature of it is that it is empty of any inherent existence. What they're saying is, well, then if you're going to say that, then you have to analyze your whole process.
And that process
The process of analysis. You have to analyze that process of analysis. And so they're saying the first analysis then must be investigated by a second analysis, and so on. And in this way, the analysis must lead to an infinite series of recurring analyses. It's kind of crazy. So here's the last stanza where Shantideva says, stanza 110. If phenomena are truly analyzed, then no basis for analysis remains. And when the object is removed, the subject too subsides. That indeed is said to be nirvana. So upon establishing the lack of inherent existence of all phenomena, if one proceeds to further analyze the ultimate reality of the lack of inherent existence, one will discover the lack of inherent existence of ultimate reality. In this case, the subject of analysis is emptiness, and one discovers the ultimate reality of ultimate reality. One discovers the emptiness of emptiness itself. And that's where he leaves it. So this was a pretty dense and rich section, as was the previous one on feelings.
Now, so why is he talking about this? That's all.
Why is he talking about this?
I mean, in the context of the Bodhisattva path, remind me again. I'm listening, I guess I'm impressed. So, I mean, yeah.
He's talking about this because we have a tendency to think that everything we observe through our consciousnesses, mental and sense consciousnesses, we have the habitual tendency to see them, experiencing them as if they truly, inherently, independently exist. And this goes for everything, not just for the phenomena that appear out there, or the phenomena that's sort of going on in our head, our thoughts, but also this idea of who we are, me, I, my ego. We think that also exists independently, inherently, unto itself, its own thing. And because of that mistaken view of independent self-existence of everything, especially of phenomena and the ego itself, the ego, that creates a situation where our egos develop a sense of separateness from everything else. And that sense of separateness, then from that arises a sense of neediness. I need things. I must have things. And so then we sort of look out and we grasp onto various things, whatever they be. And the ones that seem to sort of feed us what we want, what we think we need, we become very attached to those, and we want those, and we like those, and we work for those. But what happens always, invariably, in every single case, there will be something, someone, some entity, something that sort of gets in the way of what this ego wants, what it's grasping and attached for. And then there arises all of these afflictive emotions, all the anger, the hatred, the depression, the guilt, all of this arises because of that wrong view of seeing myself as independently self-existent, and everything else, including other selves and other phenomena, existing that way too. This is why there's a war in the Middle East right now. It's exactly that reason. Somebody is not getting what they want. And because they're not getting what they want, they are lashing out and attacking whoever they think is in the way of getting what they want. And this is the history of samsara. This is what goes on in every realm. And this is why this is important. This is why we have to get a grip on this. And the reason why this is so difficult, why this is so dense, why this is so hard for us to grasp is because we are just we've never trained ourselves to think this way. This is like new information to us. And it's difficult for us to even hear it properly because it's not part of the ingrained way we apparently have been
Would you
since the
think,
beginning of time.
it would be in the self-interest of the powers that be in every era
Oh yeah.
to construct systems of thought and education systems that steer us away from.
Oh, true. Absolutely. I mean, this would be why, there would be monarchies, why there would be, what anybody would be attracted to control, wanting to control, to wanting to get things the way that they wanted them to be so that they could get what they think they want. Well, the more powerful and the more grasping you are, the more you're going to want to arise to a position of some kind of control, get at the top of that heap. So this is the history of government. This is the history of monarchies. This is the history of leadership, is that they will, in order to get what they want. How many times has America, for instance, gone to war, and we'll have our leaders say, God bless America, as we're going off to go kill, other people. Basically, we don't actually want to kill other people. It's not what we want to do. But somebody wants to do that. Somebody wants to have these kinds of things occurring because the grasping at the power and the neediness and what they want is so strong that they will manipulate. This happens in families. People will manipulate in families to get what they want. Parents will manipulate their children. Children will manipulate their parents just to get what they want. Why would that be different than society at large? And then when you get to governments and when you get to kingdoms and things like that, religions, why would they not? If it's based in this ego self-grasping, which is what samsara is. It's just the nature of samsara. Of course, why not? It would all be about manipulation, no matter at what level you are at. As long as we have this ego self-grasping, me, mine, this is what we're going to do. Until we have a view of complete interconnectedness, interdependence, we develop our love and compassion, our wisdom, then that will change. But, we don't see that much of it going on now or in the history of the world. So it's up to us. This is why, to me, this path is the most important thing, bar none, really, because it includes everything. It includes everyone. It includes everything. It's about total transformation for the good, for goodness, and wisdom. I can't see anything better than that. So that's why.
Thanks.
Any other? Yeah.
Christopher, you mentioned an alternate resource that you were using besides the Dalai Lama, and his name or her name, I think, was Wallace or what?
His Holiness is the Dalai Lama's commentary. The person who translated that commentary and made annotations on that is B. Allen Wallace. So that's part of His Holiness's commentary. It goes with it. There's another commentary that the Padmakara translation group put out. Wulstan Fletcher is part of that translation group, and that is the commentary by Khenpo Kunpel, who was a 19th century Buddhist. He was the student of a very well-known Rinpoche, Patrul Rinpoche, who traveled around India teaching the Bodhisattva way. And so Khenpo Kunpel was one of his closest disciples and wrote down everything Patrul Rinpoche said and then made a commentary based on that. So it's a great document, that particular one.
Okay. Is it included in our reference materials on
It's included, if you download these that are underneath the YouTube videos, it's all here up at the top. All of my reference is there. Yeah, those I say also, the commentaries are very difficult to wade through. I thought I was going to, hit the jackpot when I finally got, His Holiness the Dalai Lama's commentary and annotated by Allen Wallace and blah blah blah. And I opened up the first couple of pages, and it's like, oh. This is like reading code. It's again like reading code. So, it's up to us. And if we really care about this, we're gonna persevere and we're gonna do what we can. So, I have dictionaries out, and I'm looking at all kinds of resources on the internet to try and understand what it is they're saying. Even the words they're using sometimes there are words that I never use. I've never heard of these words. And so you learn a lot, actually, if you really go into it, if you really take the time with it. There's a lot to be learned, and there's a lot of, I'm blown away by the amount of wisdom that is in this particular chapter. The wisdom chapter, it lives up to its name, it really does. So
I read that, I can't remember if it was in the context of just this, or if it was Buddha in general, just the Shantideva text or Buddhism in general, that all the other subject matter is leading you for the purpose of being able to understand and have a realization about emptiness or
Yeah.
dependent arising.
It was this. It was Shantideva himself said it.
Okay, okay.
All of everything I've said before up to this wisdom chapter was
one
leading
through
you to
8.
this. Yeah, it was leading up to this. All the the teachings about compassion, all of those teachings, and then the teachings about the courageous effort that we need to make. And it is courageous effort when you get down to it, because you're directly confronting the nature of reality and how you think you exist and how you think the world exists. And you're looking at this in a different way, and it takes a lot of courage to do that. It takes a willingness to transform and change, and I mean, it takes even a willingness to say, there could be another world, another existence, another way we could live, another kind of body we could have.
Earlier, I was distracted and writing a text because I had just gotten a text from Lama Pasang, he just confirmed that he's flying to Houston on November 15th, and he wants to come to San Antonio thereafter. I don't know how soon, but either that following weekend on the 17th, 18th, 19th, or the weekend after, which I think would be Thanksgiving weekend. But anyway, he doesn't plan to stay long, as I understand it. And he wants to have a gathering, but not so much a class. But anyway, so be looking for the news about when we might have a chance to meet up with Lama Pasang. Okay, yeah, that's all.
Okay.
Just thought I'd mention that. I know you were concerned that I was on my phone texting, and
Well, I didn't know what you were doing, but
that's what
I
I
figured it
saying.
was important.
Well, it was not super important.
Well, I would like to just add one comment, because I end up often just more confused than not.
I understand.
And, anyway, Robert Thurman,
Yeah.
he retired, and he's just filling the internet with all kinds of stuff, including talks he's given over the last 5 or 10 years. And he has a podcast as well as just a website and readings. And I find him difficult to follow. He kind of seems to go in circles, but he uses different words from the ones that, I think all of these writings are written using words that mean different things to me. And Robert Thurman uses completely different words from those, like psychonauts, and says we're all in nirvana right now, we just don't realize it. But anyway, he's amusing and somewhat comical, and just gives a more lighthearted approach to what seems so deadly serious.
He certainly does. It's true. He's always
and incomprehensible. So I keep saying it's just a translation problem, but
well, yeah.
It is. I mean, it is, and I'll just say he is definitely. He's a disciple of the Dalai Lama, and he's definitely of this same exact lineage. But he's got a whole different vernacular, as you point out.
Yeah, and one of the things that Venerable Robina always said, and I completely agree with her, is that we've got to clarify our terms if a group of us are getting together and talking about this kind of information, we have to be in agreement on what we're referring to when we say a particular thing. Because some of these terms will mean something different to different people. So they have to be defined. The words have to be defined ahead of time, so everybody understands that we're all on the same page when we're talking. So
for me, the description "clear light," to me meant like I was looking at the sun without eclipse glasses.
Right.
But I think Thurman used transparent, and then I read somebody else that used translucent, and so there are lots of other options out there from what seems to have been the one and only English translation that often is confusing to me. So just kind of looking at how other English translators use it has been helpful. And Thurman he's not a serious, preachy kind of guy. more a comedian, I think, in many ways. And that's nice to have.
It is.
Anyway, that was just one resource that you didn't have on there. And I don't know that really for understanding this, it's the best one, but it's another way to get translations.
Does he have a commentary on the Way of the Bodhisattva?
I don't think so. I haven't come across, I was just looking at emptiness.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just trying to see how people talked about that in words that I could grasp.
And it also can be interesting when, if sometimes when I'm trying to get to, I don't understand what the actual Tibetan or Sanskrit was, right? So I'm trying to understand what is being meant by a particular word, say luminous or illuminating. And then looking at the way different people who speak Tibetan will translate that word into English and sort of get a broader picture of what they're trying to get at. So today when I was talking about the mind being illuminating, and I used the example of, if we just think of the moon. So all of a sudden in one's mind, it's as if the moon is just illuminating the mind. They don't mean that the mind is also all of a sudden turned bright and filled with light. It's just that you think of the moon and it's like the moon is illuminating the mind. It's as if the moon is presenting itself into our mind, in that way illuminating. But it doesn't mean that it's like this bright light. And also the clear, they're saying it's transparent and clear, like pure water is transparent and clear. And that all of our afflictive emotions and ignorance and confusion, it's like clear water that has been polluted. And so it becomes muddy and dirty. But it's so that's the analogy they're making, and that just as the way we can remove pollution from water and it gets back to its natural clear state, we can do the same thing with our mind. We can remove the ignorance, we can remove all the delusions and all the afflictive emotions from our mind, and then our mind will be clear again. Clear. So it just takes time. and reading different things and hearing different teachers talk about it. I agree with you. First time I heard it, I thought it meant like it was some just big bright light,
And fortunately, we have infinite lives to figure it out. I mean, that's the solace.
Fortunately.
Infinite plus one, maybe.
Yeah. Okay, if there are no more comments or questions or anything like that, we can go to our closing prayers. So we'll do the final dedication. No, we'll do the first one, dedication prayers. The one about bodhicitta, the one about emptiness, and then the final dedication. I guess we can do these in Tibetan today. Jang chup sem chok Rinpoche ma kye panam kye gyo chi kye panyam pa me pa yang gong ne gong du per war shup tong ye tawa Rinpoche ma kye panam Kye gyu chi kye panyam pa me pa yang gong ne gong du per war shu. And then the final dedication on the last page. Kye wa kundu yandag lama Dreme chunki palang ching sadang ki onten razone dorje changi gopang yurto shu. Ding, ding, dong. Yes. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you so much.
Let's
Thank you,
keep
Christopher.
undiluted. Clear. Okay. Talk to you all later. I'll stop the recording here.